Hi, everyone. Thanks for viewing our roundtable discussion. Our topic today is centered around the impact of COVID-19, mostly on retailers and grocers. So I'd like to bring in our panelists and ask that they introduce themselves and their significant backgrounds. Richard, if it's okay, let's start with you.
Thank you, Scott. I'm Richard Wildrum. I head up sales and marketing for Traverse System. My background is traditional software in ERP and supply chain, probably for the last 30 years.
Awesome. Thank you. Greg?
Hi, my name is Greg Holder. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Traverse Systems. I have an industrial engineering degree and spent most of my time working in distribution operations and logistics operations at Dillard's Inc. and Stage Stores before founding Traverse Systems 20 years ago.
Awesome. Thanks. David?
And my name is David Watts, and I'm the CFO and one of the co-founders of Traverse Systems as well. And I have been in the retail industry for most of my business career, working in all aspects of the retail industries. Same thing with Dillard's and Stage Stores before founding Traverse Systems with Greg.
Great. Thanks so much. Well, let's kick the panel off. Richard, I'm going to start with you, and then it's been quite a year. Maybe you could just take a moment and describe to us just a few of the impacts you've seen with COVID-19 across different businesses and what you see our customers are experiencing and prospects are experiencing today.
Scott, I would certainly agree with you. It has been quite a year, hasn't it? Probably the biggest thing that we as an organization have seen is not the changing of retail, but really the acceleration of it. And what I mean by that is prior to the pandemic, there were a bunch of new processes put in place. And what I mean by that is store delivery, particularly grocery, BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup, and certainly e-com. What the pandemic has done has just accelerated all those technologies. The big issue, though, is that many of these companies are in various degrees of implementation, meaning that many of them aren't optimized today. So while we as consumers are seeing these new and emerging technologies, that doesn't mean that they're optimized for the retailer, which translates into not only higher costs, but profitability. So that being said, there's still a lot of work for these folks to do. A good anecdotal example of this is my neighbor is a VP level, works for a very high-end department store. She is the store manager. Quite a few times I've seen her go off to work in jeans to pick and pack e-com orders. Needless to say, from a cost and efficiency standpoint, that's not very sustainable for the long run.
Right. Well, I think we as consumers have obviously experienced what I consider to be called inventory disruptions, or just disruptions in general in all areas of the supply chain. So I can think about even back in March and April, you know, placing an order curbside and getting about 50% of it.
Yeah.
And if I did get 50%, a lot of time there were substitutions. That's a grocery example. What are you seeing from a disruption perspective, whether it be for inventory or any other area across retail, grocery, consumer packaged goods?
Yeah. So pre-pandemic, if you were to ask most retailers what's their inventory problem, 9 times out of 10, it's not a supply problem, it is a demand problem.
Yeah.
And for retailers, markdowns are just a dirty word because of its impact on profitability. So that is exactly what we've seen, is disruptions in the supply chain. You know, as a part of this process, you know, there's been the pandemic has kind of picked winners and losers for the most part. Certain industries like consumer staples have done very well. Other areas like apparel have been hit pretty hard, but both areas are hit with supply constraints. So that is a huge issue. That is just one side of the coin, though. The opposite side of the coin is transportation. Transportation across the board was constrained prior to COVID. Now it's just out of control. When you get companies like Walmart and Amazon, you know, complaining about the ability to secure capacity, you know there's some major issues out there.
Yep. Okay. So what, and I'm sure you're out talking to supply chain leaders and chief merchant officers. What do you feel their top concerns are just as we wind up this year and looking into next year? What are you hearing out there? What are some trends that you feel like we need to be cognizant of?
So depending on who it is you talk to in the enterprise, you get a different response.
Yep.
Certainly for the chief merchants, a couple of things come to mind. Number one is that optimization of those aforementioned processes. It has to become profitable. Everybody likes Instacart, right? They've done a great job. They're just expensive. And so
It does get expensive.
they're expensive for everybody involved. So you're seeing grocery store chains look at how they can bring that capability in-house.
Yeah.
The second thing chief merchants are looking at is anything related to the customer experience. With COVID now in the equation, they're looking at it. How do they make that experience as seamless, as safe as possible for the consumer? So those two issues for the chief merchant are really top of mind. The supply chain folks, the folks that we deal with on a day in and day out basis, I got to be honest, they are literally looking under rocks to not only to make their operations more efficient, but to cut cost as well too. You've got a perfect storm here. You've got transportation issues. You've got, depending on the retailer, you've got sales issues. You may or may not have sales issues. And then throw on top of that, you've got transportation constraints. It's almost like a nightmare scenario for many of these practitioners. So for them, the kind of the key areas that we keep hearing, a lot of it's around inventory. It's inventory speed, it's visibility, it's inventory integrity,
Yep.
and just overall execution. And again, whether your industry has been affected or not, profits are going to be impacted across the board. So making sure that supply chain is as efficient and cost effective as possible is what they're talking about.
Okay, awesome. Well, Greg, I'd like to bring you into the discussion. I mean, obviously, as what I consider to be one of the chief architects at Traverse Systems, how do you feel our current offerings are meeting the challenges today, and where do you see some of our future products fitting in?
Well, I believe our products actually have fit in perfectly for the last 20 years. Going back to when we formed our company, we really wanted to help retailers automate the vendor compliance process. We wanted to do three things when we formed our company. We wanted to automate the identification of the supply chain failures. We wanted to automate the calculation of the penalties, and we wanted to automate the communication of those problems so that as a result, our customers would supply chain. But in order to automate the identification of the supply chain failures, we needed data from execution systems, and bringing that data into one place actually gave us something that we didn't understand at the time. It gave them visibility. Our customers have told us that they care about on time and complete. They tell us that they want damage-free errors, or damage-free and error-free shipments. This does several things that Richard talked about. This reduces their costs. This actually increases their speed because problem orders don't get stuck in the supply chain or get stuck in the distribution center somewhere. And it also gives them just speed from the whole entire purchase order life cycle. So since we've been doing this for 20 years, we've focused initially on the accountability and reliability in the supply chain. Accountability comes with the chargebacks themselves. The reliability, it gives them a reliable supply chain. And one of the things that I mentioned before that we didn't really understand at the time was we give them visibility in their supply chain that we didn't understand. We give them the opportunity to analyze what's happening in their supply chain. And they have that because we bring in data from their execution systems that is typically siloed, and we put it all in one location. And so the visibility analysis piece gives our customers the opportunity to trust the shippers, trust their suppliers, but also verify that things are happening as expected. They communicate expectations. They perform audits to understand what's happening. questions that they ask themselves that we ask is, would you rather buy from a shipper that fills you at 100% and 2 weeks late? Or would you rather buy from a shipper that fills you at 70% is an on time 95% of the time? Many of our customers and prospects that we talk to don't even understand which suppliers can fill at 100% and 100% on time, or which suppliers are doing the 100% and 2 weeks late. Yeah. If you ask most buyers of product, most merchants of product, they understand or they believe that their fill rate's 100%. I think that during this pandemic, we have easily discovered that that's not the case. We have a unique way of comparing the actual receipt of product to the intent of the buy that really helps our customers understand the performance from both on time and complete of their suppliers.
Okay. So Richard had touched on a couple different disruption challenges, both in the buyer types that he talks to, whether that be the chief supply chain officer or the chief merchant officer. Could you pick just one or two of those disruptions and kind of give us maybe a real world example of, you know, what Traverse has done to help manage it, either from a supply chain visibility perspective, on time and in full, or something recent that has come to mind?
Well, if we focus completely on that, or we focus for the moment on time and complete, during this pandemic, a lot of orders are shipped short. Our customers that have traditionally held their suppliers accountable to a fill rate are those that are seeing their fill rates not lost as much during this pandemic. Let me go back for a second. 42% of our customers during this pandemic were closed either 100% or near 100% and deemed not reliable, but those are not essential. But the balance of those customers, of all of our customers, were extremely busy. So you might imagine that the companies that are open, products are flying off the shelf like crazy. Yep. And many of those customers came to us and told us, they said, hey, look, our fill rates are lower than they have been. We don't know if our suppliers have the products or not. We want to make sure that we're the ones that are being filled. How is it that you can help us understand what's happening related to that? They also said that we don't want purchase orders being held up because one item is not available. So the first step in all of that is you, just like any program, it's related to communication and collaboration. So you got to very clearly communicate those expectations, whether it's before a pandemic or after a pandemic or during the pandemic. And it's not only communicate those expectations to say that nothing has changed. You still expect your orders to be filled at the 100%. You still expect those orders to be filled on time. And if they cannot be met, then you're asking those suppliers to communicate with your buying organization and see if you can work out some other situation. So let's take a specific example. You got a purchase order with 10 items and 9 items the supplier can fill. We want that supplier communicating to us and saying, hey, I got 1 or 2 items that are delayed. What do you want me to do? Split those off onto a separate purchase order, ship me the stuff that you can ship. That's a very, very big part of it. You need to understand that. You need to be able to easily get to that data. And let me take it one step further. We know that over the last 2 years, my notes here, we know that over the last 2 years, our customers have been filled from a unit fill rate from 84% all the way up to 100.4%. If I were a supplier, I'd ship 10% more on a purchase order every time, because I know that customers will accept it if they have it in stock. But an 84% fill rate, is that acceptable? It might be acceptable to some, it might not be acceptable to others. This is globally. So what if that 84% is on really hot product or replenishable product? It makes a difference. Not only that, the average fill rate across all of our customer base is 95% across all order types. So whether that's a replenishment type of order, whether that's a fashion type order, is that good or is that bad? I'm reporting the numbers. I challenged other people to decide if that's good or bad, but let me add one more number to that. We have a 95% fill rate across all our customers. 60% of those units are what we define as on time. 35% are late, and with an average late days of 16 days. So when we get to talk to merchants and buying organizations, some of the things that we like to talk about is specifically when we're talking about fill rate, one of the questions we talk about, or one of the questions we like to bring up is, or one of the statements we like to make is that you sell absolutely 0% of the product that the vendor never ships. 0% of the product that the vendor never ships. So when Richard talked about on time and late and disappointing customers, and we talk about inventory accuracy, well, a big part of the out of stock situation in a lot of cases are probably because a vendor is either shipping it late or a vendor doesn't have it and is not shipping it at all. Our customers know which vendors are late. Our customers know which vendors are shipping short. But there's a lot of folks out there that just can't understand that, don't have the ability to drive down to the item level to find out repeatedly what is not being shipped by a supplier and be able to communicate and work with those customers or those suppliers.
Great. So going into 2021, how would you think retailers or grocers or really any of the industries that are planning for supplier performance optimization, what should they be thinking about from a strategy perspective? How can they improve supplier performance? What are some best practices that you could think of, and kind of given our current state as we look at a new year around optimization?
Two things. First of all, you need to very clearly communicate your expectations to your customer, to your suppliers. First and foremost, you do that as often, as frequently as you can. You do that with every person and matter in your organization. And then you hold them accountable to those expectations. Collaborative, communicate, all very important. But there's two things that really stand out. Point number one is that the customers that are watching this webinar, they all have IT organizations. I think the first thing they need to do is understand that IT organizations can do anything that is requested of them, but they should also recognize that there's only limited resources in their IT organizations and they can't do everything. And for that, we would encourage them to go find people out in the industry that can help them accomplish those goals, people that have been successful with that. I think that we're one of those partners that would do a great job to help them optimize their inbound supply chain. We have several products that would do that. The Traverse platform, first of all, is a platform that helps them understand and hold the vendors accountable, not just understand, and it also shows them from an analysis perspective, something that has always been very underutilized until this pandemic. Kind of a side note, I've always believed that the information that the execution, the analysis piece of our application is probably more valuable than the expense offsets that are created with it, just in terms of understanding and learning and recognizing that if you can't change your vendors, maybe you can change your order practices to still become successful in the inbound supply chain. And then the second thing that I think people should focus on in Rivet is helping their suppliers become better performing suppliers. We're introducing a new product that we call Rivet that is going to help our customers bring their suppliers on board. It's going to help our customers help their suppliers become better suppliers to their customers. It'll do much more than that, but we're kind of focused on the area that would allow our retailers to make their suppliers a much better performing vendor for our customers.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. David, I'd like to transition to you. Could you give us just a view of what you're seeing? You obviously hold a unique position inside of Traverse. Maybe your viewpoint on what you're seeing with inventory disruption, or even if you want to touch on, how Rivet plays in some of the challenges that both Richard and Greg have brought up.
Yeah, the inventory disruptions, I think both Greg and Richard have pointed a lot of things out, but it's what's been interesting is that it's all over the board. It's different for every customer. It's different for all the vendors. I mean, with a global pandemic, it's exactly that, global. And so in past, when you had, supply chain disruptions, they were very, localized, whether or not it was a hurricane, whether or not it was, the fires in California, the supply chains are always affected. But with this global pandemic, vendors, obviously our customers have vendors all over the world. You don't know what's happening in the different parts of the world, and how COVID has shut down certain plants, shut down certain, regions. And so, the disruptions have been everywhere, and across the board. And then, I think one of the major ones that was prior to COVID and has been exasperated and will continue to be exasperated is the transportation, like Richard said. It's the supply of the transportation world just is lacking. And so it impacts everything. It impacts the cost. As Greg said, while you can be 95%, complete or, in full, you may be, 65% late or 35% late. That's a major impact. And it's not only from a cost standpoint, but from, having the product on your shelf. And that's been obviously an enormous change in our industry, as Richard alluded to, is the speed to market. And so when you can't get things in on time, it obviously affects your sales, it affects your promotions, and increases your markdowns in the long run.
Okay. Well, just staying on that thread, how do you feel like our customers are coping, and just what's the impact on the financial side for them? Are they still seeing dramatic monetary returns on performance management, or what's happening on the financial side with our customers?
Well, obviously, just from a pure sales standpoint, most customers have been impacted significantly because of COVID. I mean, that just goes without saying. As Greg said, we had 40% of our customers that were closed for 3 months. Well, I mean, that's obviously a major, disruption to their revenue. As they're opening back up, we've heard anecdotal evidence is that for the customers that were doing well, right? When you have 40% of the customer base shut down, where those customers are going somewhere, or their customers are going somewhere. And so we've had, the grocery industry, they couldn't keep stock in. There was some other industries they couldn't keep stock in, and they can't keep up with the demand, which is kind of an interesting dichotomy, with what's going on, with a lot of the customers. So from everybody's just struggling to get back to normalcy right now, and it's slowly getting there. Some customers are doing really well. Some customers are struggling to get back on their feet. And it's been a major impact. We've had several of our customers file for bankruptcy. And so a couple of them were Chapter 11. We had one that's liquidating. So it's been an enormous impact, to the industry and to our customer base.
Yep. Well, I'm just thinking about maybe a good news story. What is there one you could kind of bring to the table around a sign of recovery that you've seen, whether it be a current customer or a prospect that you've been talking to?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things. One, I made the joke the other day. I think everybody in the entire world is ready for 2020 to go away, except for Patrick Mahomes, with his contract increase and getting married and winning a Super Bowl. So outside Patrick, everybody's ready for 2020 to go away. And so people, the good news is that we're opening back up. As everybody knows, that's obviously the best news you could have. People are starting to go back into the stores. That's a good, obviously a good thing. Everybody is on pins and needles on what's going to happen throughout the fall season and the Christmas season. In the retail world, so much of the profitability is around the Christmas season, and so they're on pins and needles. Some people are starting to see some good news. Some are still struggling, only from the standpoint of there's still a supply chain gut or rut that's going on. Still trying to get that product in. When you close for 3 months, all of the suppliers are closed for months on end. Well, it's very difficult to turn that on a dime and get it ramped up. And so that's what we're seeing right now, is that everybody's going through that ramp up period. And nobody's ever dealt with that, going from, zero to scratch. It's like opening up a brand new, store. the entire world is doing that, right? But there is a lot of good news out there where it's, again, slowly starting to come in. People are still on pins and needles, and I think most everybody just wants to get past 2020 and let's get back to some normalcy.
Absolutely. Well, first, thanks to all the panelists today for your insights. We certainly appreciate it. And also for the viewers out there, we would love to continue the conversation with you on traversesystems.com. So be safe and well this fall, and have a great day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.